Feathers. Oh, I thought feathers there for a second was like a somebody's last name. But anyways, feathers recently taken from seabirds, stuffed and preserved in the 1880s, have been found to contain only half as much mercury as feathers recently taken from living birds of the same species. Okay, interesting. They found these birds that had been preserved a long time ago, and they looked at the mercury in them, and there's less mercury in those feathers than there is from the birds living today. I mean, I'm not super surprised about that. I hear about mercury in the environment all the time. You can't eat anything without worrying about mercury, or like, salmon or whatever. So this isn't super surprising. We've polluted our world. Since mercury that accumulates in a seabird's feathers as the feathers grow is derived from fish eaten by the bird. Okay, so the mercury that comes into the feathers is coming from mercury that was in the fish that the birds ate. These results indicate that mercury levels in saltwater fish are higher now than they were 100 years ago. Okay, I do think that this is very likely the case, just given my understanding of mercury and whatnot. But that's not my job. My job isn't to agree with conclusions. My job is to figure out whether the conclusion is proven. So does it have to be 100% true that because there's a difference in the amount of mercury between these old dead stuffed birds and the current living ones, that mercury levels are now higher in saltwater fish? Can I think of any other reasons why mercury might have been lower in the stuffed birds? The thing that comes to my mind right away is, okay, is there something about the fact that this is like a preserved animal that it's not a good, I don't know, it's like losing mercury over time, or, I mean, that would be my main concern, and therefore it actually had more mercury a long time ago. Caitlin, you had your hand up. You're good?
I was thinking the exact same thing. I was like, maybe live birds just have more mercury, and then a dead bird that's been like preserved for a long time, maybe it just depletes. That was where I was going, but then you
Yeah.
said the same exact thing.
Yeah. It's just like evaporating over time. I don't know how mercury works, but like there is that possibility, right? Therefore, this conclusion isn't proven. Maybe there's something else going on here too. Maybe the birds are eating more fish, or the mercury is moved around in the fish so that it's more absorbable, right? They talk about this with like daily vitamins. You can take vitamins and they don't get absorbed into your system, but different vitamins can be absorbed depending on the form that they take. Anyways, that's my concern with this conclusion. It's probably true, but I don't think it's proven. There are some potential problems here. And then the question says, the argument depends on assuming that. Okay, and so then I got to find an assumption, and the word depends tells me that we're looking for a necessary assumption. So what is an assumption that the argument is making? What is something that the argument is assuming that it has to assume? It depends on this assumption. So as I go through these answer choices, I'm going to ask myself, is this something that the author has to agree with? Does the author have to agree with this answer choice? If the author would have to agree with this answer choice, then that's the correct answer. If the author doesn't have to agree, no matter how helpful the answer is, then it's wrong because it's not a necessary assumption. So what does the author have to agree with here? One prediction would be the author has to agree that mercury doesn't dissipate or leave dead birds slowly over time. The author has to be assuming that, right? Because if the author didn't believe that, then this conclusion would start to fall apart. Sound good? A, the proportion of a seabird's diet consisting of fish was not as high on average in the 1880s as it is today. Okay, so if if the fish, if the birds from a long time ago didn't eat as much fish as they do today. Actually, this is one of the things I think I was talking about. If they didn't eat as much fish as they do today, then that could explain why they have less mercury, not the fact that mercury levels have actually gone up. So if this answer choice were true, this would really hurt the author's argument. So this is something they cannot agree with, right? The author would be like, no. I think they eat the same amount of fish today as they did before. So because the author has to disagree with this answer choice, it is definitely wrong. Okay? I'm looking for something that the author has to agree with. This would hurt the argument. It's not an assumption the argument is making. Anyways, B, the amount of mercury in saltwater fish depends on the amount of pollution in the ocean habitat of the fish. This is probably true, but is this something that the author has to agree with? Well, the author never talked about pollution. The author never talked about how the mercury levels in the saltwater fish are higher. The author is just saying that it is higher. Hey, the levels are higher. How? The author never said how. So does the author have to agree that it's because of pollution? No. They could be like, I don't care how the mercury is higher. It's just higher. So that's wrong. C, mercury derived from fish is essential for the normal growth of a seabird's feathers. Okay. Also, the author does not have to agree with this. The author could say, no, I think mercury is actually very harmful to the fish and to the seabirds. It's just not helpful for anybody. That doesn't have anything to do with the conclusion. D, the stuffed seabirds whose feathers were tested for mercury were not fully grown. Oh, this is like answer choice A. This is not good. I'm guessing that the author is actually assuming the opposite, that the seabirds were fully grown, and that's why they, even though they had less mercury, it wasn't because they were younger. It was actually because they had less mercury in their environment. So we don't want to assume this. This is wrong. E, the process used to preserve birds in the 1880s did not substantially decrease the amount of mercury in the bird's feathers. Okay, this is not exactly what I predicted. I predicted that the mercury went away over time, but this is almost like the process itself, maybe when the bird was preserved, took out the mercury. If that were true, then this argument would get undermined. So the author has to be assuming that the process didn't substantially change or decrease the amount of mercury in the bird's feathers. If it did, that'd be a big problem. So the author has to agree with this. This is the necessary assumption. Or this is, I shouldn't say the necessary assumption. What I want to say is this is a necessary assumption. There are probably other necessary assumptions being made by this argument, but that doesn't matter. We just need to find one, and this is one of them. Questions? Okay. Does the age of the birds even matter for answer choice D? I think it does matter. I think if the birds were younger, then you could be like, oh, well, there wasn't as much mercury in their feathers because they didn't live as long, so they didn't have as much time to accumulate it. But if that were true, then that would explain why the mercury was lower, not the actual change in mercury in their diet. So here's another question. Are we finding a statement that supports his argument? Yes. So a necessary assumption will help the argument, but that's not the question you're asking yourself. You're not asking yourself, does this support the argument? Your question is this a claim that the author has to agree with? If they did agree with it, it would help the argument on some level. It may not help it very much, but the real problem is if it's not true, then it would destroy the argument. Okay. Yeah, A and D Carlin, yes, both of them weaken the argument. That's not good. That's definitely not good. It's not something the author doesn't have to agree with a claim that would then ultimately end up hurting the argument. That would be silly. Okay, good questions. Anything else? All right.